Today on the Avenue podcast, we have the pleasure of welcoming Mark Sultana from DSDG Architecture and Mike Kokoza from Trinity Custom Homes. Glad to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me as well.
So let's talk a little bit about how the design and construction process has evolved in the last few years in Florida, namely in the Sarasota area, largely due to hurricanes and some of the temperamental weather that we have around. Let's talk a little bit about what both of your companies do, and then we can get into a little bit more of the granular details about how this has all evolved.
Okay. Mark Sultana, I'm principal architect at DSDG Architects. We've been working with Trinity for I'm not even sure how many years now, but excellent contractor. We love the collaboration that we have together. Most of the projects we do, I would say actually all of the projects we do, have to meet hurricane regulations dictated by the Florida Building Code. Some of them are more severe than others in that houses that are constructed directly on beachfront have different standards and different requirements than houses, say, built on a canal, bay front, or even out east of the interstate. We have different type of wind requirements in all these zones and different type of flood requirements in all the zones. So most of our work is in Florida. We occasionally do projects outside of the state, but everything we do in Florida is meant to meet the Florida Building Code.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So, Mike, let's talk a little bit about your company and what Trinity Custom Homes does and maybe how you guys have collaborated in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Mike Kokoza. I'm president of Trinity Construction Design. I'm born and raised here in the Sarasota area, operating in the construction industry and many different roles. Superintendent for other builders, ran a carpentry business for a long time, and started Trinity Construction in 2010, and have been doing that since. We focus primarily on the luxury custom home market. So most of our projects are in and around the Barrier Islands, waterfront type projects. So really dealing a lot with the hurricane codes. Most of the state of Florida, you're dealing with hurricane codes, but really steps up a few levels as you get into the Barrier Islands and waterfront type properties, as Mark had mentioned, for the different wind zones, higher wind velocity, and then also the different flood zones and scour and those types of things.
So let's talk a little bit more about these codes. They've obviously evolved over the years. How has that created a new implication on the design side as well as on the construction side?
Well, I think the biggest implication is the interpretation on the code. So everywhere we work, the building officials and the local FEMA regulatory authorities have different interpretations on the code. You ask, well, isn't it the same code? Yes, it's the same code, but the different municipalities interpret that code differently. So, for instance, Sarasota County, the city of Sarasota, Longboat Key, Anna Maria, Holmes Beach, Manatee County, City of Bradenton, they are all different authorities that dictate the code and interpret the code differently.
Interesting. So can we go into, I can imagine. So that means that your team has to have proficiency with the different interpretations of the code for all these different areas. So how does that, as an architect, affect how your team works based on where they're actually designing a project?
Well, it helps that we have experience in all these areas, but I will tell you that sometimes we get surprises from, say, a new employee of one of these municipalities that interprets it differently than the past employees of the last 24 years. And it creates a surprise where we have to redesign a structure to meet that new employee's requirements.
So how do those implications affect you on the building side?
I think Mark was being rather polite there. It's, really a lot of moving targets, and the strange part is when we start talking to some of these municipalities, some of these different building departments, it's not, you'd think it'd be easy to bring them a design, have some initial dialogue and some conversations about what our design intent is going to be. But it typically doesn't go that way. I mean, are you experiencing that? I find a lot of times you have some opening conversation with them, and it's really, well, just design it and send it to me and we can have a conversation then. So there's a lot of legwork. There's a lot of upfront work. And, quite frankly, sometimes it seems like there should be some better communication, some better collaboration and some of those things. But, Mark and I have been dealing with a project down on Minnesota Key that one of the new employees of the building department had made a determination about what a wall is, and so this was a new determination or new definition that caused the structural engineer to have to go back and redesign the home 3 times in order to finally get it through permitting. And so I certainly understand. I don't want to put myself in that individual's shoes because I know that they've got a lot of different people to answer to, and I know it's a difficult job. But it makes it very difficult for the process between architect, builder, and client in order to put your best foot forward and show up with a design that's going to be accurate up front. And so sometimes that's difficult to explain to our clients. But at the end of the day, it's what we do, and that's what we got to deal with.
So being that you guys have worked on a multitude of projects together, how have you guys found a really good way to make that work when you're dealing with these kinds of obstacles, at least from a governmental standpoint?
It's great because we'll sit down and have a conversation about, who's going to be the one to bring the topic up, who's going to be the one to start, having a conversation with the individual. When there's a question that arises, you get, typically the process is you have a set of construction documents that goes in for permitting, and then the building department's got actually multiple different departments. You've got FEMA and you've got zoning, you've got the building. You've got the health department sometimes, not so much on the barrier islands and those types of things, but in other projects you do. And so there's a multitude of different plans examiners that need to kind of put their stamp of approval on it. And what we find is it's not always that all of those individuals will have the opportunity to go through and provide their comments. Sometimes you might get 1 or 2 comments, and then you're assuming that the other individuals have looked at it, and so you go through and you work with the engineer and the architect, and you get all of the plans revised, and you submit, and then the 2 other ones who didn't comment previously, then they step in and
they chime in.
They provide theirs, and so then there's multiple rounds here. So it's difficult. We get a lot of questions from our clients. How long do you think the permitting process will take? And anywhere from 6 weeks to 30 weeks. Depending on the location of it. But working with DSDG, they're always very proactive. So when we get these review comments back, typically they're going to us because the contractor is the one that's submitting for or applying for the permit. So we're the ones getting the review comments back. Right. So we'll get those, and we'll traditionally try to reach out to the building department and say, hey, listen, we don't want to submit these plans reviews to the architect until everybody has had an opportunity to look at it, because we don't want to cause them to do more work than they have to. And then we'll look at them together, and we'll either have a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, and we'll discuss what changes need to be made to the plans in order to satisfy whatever comments the plans examiner are coming up with. And so having the opportunity to look at that both from collectively the architectural standpoint, the structural engineer standpoint, and ultimately the builders, how we're going to build it. And then a lot of times too with the interior designer, because sometimes they're going to have some finish effects, but it makes it very easy when you've got a relationship with a design team who understands the challenges that you have to deal with and is willing to look at it from all sides, all 6 sides of the cube, as it, as they say, rather than just saying, hey, hard nose, this is what it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do.
So that's more on the regulatory side. Mm-hmm. So how has this kind of inclement weather affected the physical design and the physical construction process? Because I'm sure as we're seeing hurricanes get stronger and stronger, the water's getting warmer, these storms are only going to get worse as the years come. So how have you been mindful on the design side to take this into consideration?
Well, every structure ends up having a lot more concrete than it did even 5 years ago. More concrete, more rebar, more reinforcing. And the crazy part is in Sarasota County, we're just about to get new flood maps. Mm-hmm. The county is working on accepting the maps that FEMA has provided to them. And believe it or not, most of the flood zones are actually going down.
Wow.
So I don't know how that works, but, I guess we have to trust the government on that one. and so, and then when I say they're going down, they're getting less severe than what we previously had. So yes, that could save a client money in terms of how much reinforcing and structure they're putting into the structure. It's not making the structure any weaker or stronger, but you know, we're still following the codes, the same code. Actually, the Florida building code is changing at the end of this year too.
Right.
Nothing too major that I've seen so far, but you know, minor things. They pretty much update it every couple of years.
So have you noticed from your clients, maybe the clients that are not originally from Florida that are looking to migrate down here, that their demands may have changed based on the storms, based on what they're seeing on the news in terms of how they want their future properties designed?
Yes, I have seen more and more clients asking for concrete roofs, which I think we did our first concrete roof with Mike and the Trinity group out on Longboat Key for a client. We finished their house about a year ago. But since then, we've done repeated projects with concrete roofs and even concrete middle floors. Not really that makes it any stronger, but you know, some people are more concerned about noise. Say they have a bunch of kids running around, and you know, once you pour a concrete floor in between levels, it creates a sound break between those floors. But yeah, a lot more concrete, a lot more demand for concrete roofs, which people ask me all the time. Well, is it stronger? Well, yeah, it's concrete, but does it meet the code any more than what a wood roof would? Probably not. It's still, they're both designed to, you know, if it's on a barrier island, 160 mile an hour winds. So whether it's wood or concrete, still 160 mile an hour rating.
Right. You're still following the code the same way, whether it's a concrete roof or a wood roof. So on your side, Mike, when a client approaches you before they've gone through the design process, similarly, if it's an out-of-town client, how have their demands changed when they're trying to source which builder and they meet with Trinity and they're saying, you know, I want to build my future property? How have their demands changed before they even get to the architect process?
Their demands are changing. You know, the first concrete roof that we did with Mark's team on Longboat Key, that one was the client came to us and essentially had a bad experience with a home up north where they had significant leaking and a partial roof collapse due to some insufficient roofing needs. And so this was their final home, and they said, you know, they effectively wanted it bomb proof, you know, and so that's why they elected to go with the concrete roof. The second project that we did with DSDG that had a concrete roof, that one was came about because they've got a very large rooftop entertainment area, and we looked at it, and you know, I started asking the client, you know, how many people do you imagine having up on this roof at any given time? And when he started giving us the numbers, my initial concern started going to deflection in the roof trusses once you start adding that much load on the top.
Right.
And so we went there. So those two realistically were more so different reasons other than storms. But the third one that we're getting that's in the design right now that's going to have a concrete roof that we started talking to the client about, they were specifically saying, hey, listen, we want, you know, a home that's as strong as possible. And so whereas Mark is accurate that, you know, these homes are designed, whether it's wood roof trusses or whether it's concrete roof, is still going to meet the building code. That's 100% accurate. I think that concrete does take it, you know, a notch higher, and specifically, you get some wind loads on a roof. You're not going to get any kind of flexing of that roof system or anything like that. That could translate to some architectural deficiencies, maybe drywall ceilings popping and things like that, because there's some minor movement in there. So I do think that if there's an opportunity where it can be introduced, if you've got a client that's very specific about, hey, I want to deal with as minimum amount of issues as possible, you know, in the event of a storm, I think concrete's an excellent option. And, you know, it adds some, you know, added value, just like the first or second project where you can add some additional people, you know, up on top for, you know, celebrations and things like that. You get some added benefits. It is definitely a cost increase. So those things need to be taken into consideration. You know, we're working with another client right now that, you know, their specific needs and demands or questions about the hurricane resiliency of their potential or future project really came down to insurance. with the amount of insurance companies that are dropping out of Florida, and I'm sure everybody's seeing, insurance rate hikes across the state. We just recently started a conversation with a client that, his basic understanding was, this home is most likely, there may be a point in the very near future where I've got to self-insure the home. So let's take a real hard look at every single exterior detail of the home. And I want to have some very good conversations with the engineer, the architect, about what things we can be proactive about to, minimize potential damages and things like that. Right. So realistically, I think we're going to start seeing more of that, as it comes, as it relates to insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you said, the insurance companies are really dropping like flies in Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like every day we turn on the news and it's another insurance company that's dropped out of Florida, and pretty soon we're going to be left with virtually no choices other than self-insuring.
Well, I think eventually insurance might get to the point where, self-insuring is probably a wash.
Cost-effective. Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
So in terms of building products, specifically when you're speccing out products on a plan, there's a lot of different products that you need to be mindful of, specifically as it relates to hurricanes. So how do you decide which products you spec, and what do you look for in the partners that are manufacturing these building products to ensure that the homes you're designing for your clients and the homes that you're building for your clients are up to par with the codes, as well as any kind of added safety that obviously in the luxury market that a demanding client may want?
Sure. Well, there's the core of the house, or the shell of the house, that's pretty standard. It's we're sticking with concrete block, filled solid with rebar as needed, either a wood truss roof or a concrete roof. And then all the windows and doors in the house have to go through a rigorous process of getting what's called an NOA, a Notice of Acceptance from the state of Florida, which is a very expensive process for the window and door companies to go through to achieve that rating. Then the glass itself is, we have a typical standard we use. It's an insulated impact low E glass. Mm-hmm. So it's not only providing the protection from the hurricane winds of a 2x4 shot into it with a cannon at 160 miles an hour. It also has the thermal protection of being insulated and the low E protection to provide UV protection for the house and the finishes inside. But then there's the finish materials, right? Mm-hmm. So not every house is just stucco and paint.
Right.
I would say stucco and paint is probably 75% of every house we do, but we're doing one with Trinity right now that virtually has almost no stucco, and it has all a wood look siding that's manufactured from aluminum. So it's an aluminum product, 20-year warranty that looks like wood, but it's not wood. So the client wanted that kind of warmth in the design. So we've been using these products for probably 15 years now. And we always have reps coming into our office showing us the new, latest and greatest. Oh, it works great in California and New York and Canada. But, how does it work in Florida? Because it's a different, it's a different climate.
Right.
So, some people know this, but when the reps come in, I have them leave me a sample, and I put it out in my garden and see how it does after a year before I ever think about specifying it on a project.
But I think that's a testament to your willingness to research that you have the right partners and to really be careful in who you select for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your clients.
Yeah.
So similarly, Mike, as you're going through the building process, how do Mark's decisions in the building material partners that he selects, how does that affect you on the construction side?
Well, we're going to go through and do some of the same due diligence that Mark's team is going to do. At the end of the day, it's a collaboration. We want to be able to make sure that we can stand behind the product we put out, that we can warranty it. And so there's some good conversation that occurs with Mark. And additionally, along with the design of the home, we take a look at a lot of these things. And Mark's got not only himself, but the staff there is extremely collaborative. We'll look at different ways and how we're going to tried to keep wind-driven rain out of different, window and door openings and those types of things, and have some good conversation about how to do that. And so we'll look at things and try to find ways to offer additional waterproofing methods, additional safeguards to try to make sure the home is more hurricane ready, prepared, as it possibly can be. But at the end of the day, it's, as Mark said, it's important to make sure that the types of finished materials that are being utilized on the home are ones that not only he can stand behind as a specifier, but also we can stand behind installing it. And so there's the aluminum wood look siding is an excellent product, and the tricky part is making sure that all those different products are going to finish off nicely, right? And so that's where we kind of get into the details and how those work out. And so we have some great details with Mark. There was we wanted to make sure that aluminum siding ended up flush with stucco, on a specific instance on a home, and so we looked at that and we said, okay, we're going to emit the stucco behind the aluminum siding, but we need to provide a waterproofing, method, because concrete block is not waterproof, and actually stucco is not waterproof either. It's the paint that you apply over top of the stucco that's your waterproofing. So we worked to specify a very specific waterproofing that spanned not only behind the stucco but behind the metal, and then install the aluminum over top of it, and still make sure that those finishes came out as best as they possibly could.
So the partnership really is important between the architect and the builder, especially in this type of environment where you have to be mindful of these types of weather phenomenons. It is, and I think that's the struggle really between architects and builders is finding. For architects, I would assume finding builders that really care about those details, that dig into them and look at them and want them to turn out as nicely as possible, rather than just check a box and say, okay, that part's done, let's move on, let's keep going. It's working with a team of people who genuinely care about those details. It's hard to get somebody motivated about those details. Right. You talk about a clean job site. I was listening to a podcast the other day about construction and elevating superintendents and training superintendents, and the conversation came up about if you walk onto a job site and it's dirty, like that should make your skin crawl. And you start thinking about how do you get somebody to a point where they understand your level of passion for those types of things. And so teaching that to your team, those details, and making sure everything's going to finish out right is it's an everyday challenge, everyday task.
Absolutely. Yeah, the details are a complete collaborative. So we spend months laboring over these drawings, but sometimes the connection between two items doesn't work as well as you think it works on paper. So we love having that collaborative with the contractors we work with, where we can meet them on site. They could show us, hey, I think this is a better way of doing this. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I've been doing this for a long time, but I don't know everything. And, that collaborative is so important, because giving the client the best product and project that we can give them is more important than anything else.
Yeah. And to that point, so with all the recent storms that we've had, in 2022 and even so far into 2023, do you ever have some of your customers that you've designed or built a property for that actually reach out to you after one of these storms just to thank you for the type of product that you've actually built for them?
Yeah, there's the one that we did in Longboat Key with the concrete roof. Our clients stayed through that storm when Hurricane Ian came, and it's pretty interesting. They're watching. They're right on Sarasota Bay, and the way that the home is facing, they were getting direct wind coming at them for a long period of time. And they're sitting there watching the rain pelt the sliding glass doors, and they've got a big concrete table, 8 or 10 person dining set outside that they decided to leave outside. And they said that they sat there and watched that thing lift up in the air, slam against the sliding glass door, and then blow sideways across the deck and over top of the railing and out into the yard. And they were astonished that, the sliding glass doors suffered no damage, and, gave them a real sense of peace and security that they made right decisions, building where they built, and that they're comfortable with it. So, it's neat to hear those kind of stories,
I think that's very gratifying, whether it's as an architect or as a builder, to hear the satisfaction in your work, especially in a time like that.
Oh yeah, that table took I think like 3 or 4 of my guys to pick up and move back onto the deck. So to imagine wind
incredible.
picking that up and slamming it against the doors, pretty amazing.
And so, how do you think that the next 5 years, because Mark, as you mentioned, there's been already pretty significant evolution in many of these different aspects in the last 5 years. What do you guys think the next 5 years are going to look like as it pertains to design and maybe on a regulatory side as well as on the building side?
I think that Florida had a real big wake up call back when Hurricane Andrew hit. That's when you started to see a lot of these building codes start to increase. Right. And if you look, down south of us after Hurricane Ian went through, a lot of the older homes really suffered the worst of it. But the majority, if not most of them, I guess it's the majority. Really fared quite well as far as how they performed during those storms. Everything that, we design with breakaway walls in certain flood zones and to allow flood waters to move freely through the home without putting a lot of hydrostatic pressure on the supports of the building. Right. A lot of those homes, the breakaway walls acted as intended. And a lot of those homes did, fairly quite well. There's obviously the issue where they had, in the inability to access the home due to roads being covered with sand and, weeks without power and that type of thing that the residents had to endure. But their main investment, suffered, minor, financial damages, in the overall scheme of the total cost of the home. So I think we're definitely on the right track, but with anything, I think in order for insurance companies to stay in Florida, they're going to lobby for, more stringent building codes. We're going to continue to see more and more. And I think we're going to continue to see some of the challenges that we're dealing with now where, understanding what the the code and what their I'm having a lack of words here, but what their understanding of the code is or how they define it,
right.
Just like we've seen on some of our projects. And so that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for us is how do we deal with all these different building departments and how do we get on the same page and defining what a specific code interpretation may be,
right.
But I think that we're going to continue to see more strict and more strict. I think it's good for everybody, really. It's good for the homeowner because they're going to have a home that's going to be stronger. Hopefully, if the building codes, get stricter, then maybe insurance companies will, feel more comfortable insuring those properties. But I don't ever recall a time where building codes, decreased. So I think it's natural to understand it's going to continue to get more stringent.
Yeah.
And customers just have to understand that, with that increase building code and reinforcing and so on and so forth, the costs are going to go with it. Yes. And sometimes it's hard to stomach that.
It's a hard pill to swallow for them. Well, and I think it's, the difficulty there as well is that it's really out of your control. You have to follow a specific set of guidelines and regulatory codes that are put in place. So it's out of your control and out of your control that the cost is going to be what it is in order to follow those codes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's definitely going to be interesting to see with these weather phenomenons getting stronger and stronger. I mean, we saw it with Ian. That was really the 100-year storm that seems to be occurring now every 2 to 3 years and how that's going to evolve. And how do you think that's going to affect your guys' relationship as it pertains to your two companies and following, as you said, the interpretations as new people start working for these different entities, government entities? How do you think it's going to affect your guys' relationship as it pertains to following these codes very closely?
Well, I think our relationship will continue to grow because we're kind of on the cutting edge and kind of superior architect and contractor to, some of the other kind of road-sized truck contractors that you see in town. Yes, you can always get everything done cheaper.
Of course.
But is that really what you want where you live, where you, raise your family? And I think that the two of us both of our companies create lots of economy to what we do. Yes, it may be more expensive, but it's not because we charge more. It's just because
you do it right.
We do it right, and we do it like the clients want it to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. There's, I was having a conversation with somebody another builder in town the other day about pricing and these types of things, really. And the price of a project is a byproduct of the design of the home, how it's engineered, and the finishes that the client puts in. We can't magically procure materials at a lower rate than any other contractor. We're typically buying out materials and subcontracts and labor for very similar price compared to the next guy. For us, it's important that the home is very well understood during the pricing process, and so that is very easy while working with DSDG, because we're working with them through schematic design and design development and ultimately into construction documents, where we've got a process of our own where we begin to kind of virtually construct the home during that phase. And so we have a understanding of how parts and pieces are going to go together, how they're going to affect finishes and these types of things. And so, for us, when we look at different materials, whether it's different upgrades that can provide added value as far as hurricane resistance, or even different finishes that can provide value, having the ability to show those things very clearly to a client and to quantify those things very clearly and to educate our clients on what exactly they're getting really gives them the decision of whether they see value in it or not. And so as Mark said, I truly believe that the relationship that we have is superior in the sense that both of us are looking to provide our clients ultimately with value, and not just to get a project done or to have another project in the portfolio. That the relationship, I believe, for both of our firms with our client at the end of the day is what's most important. And so my father always told me, it's your job as a builder to educate your clients and make them understand, what it is. Whether it's more, whether it's beefier components structurally for hurricane resistance, or talking to a client about whether they want to wire their house with 12 gauge rather than 14 gauge. Letting them make those decisions and educating them so that they can make a smart decision is what is important.
So can we talk a little bit about that, the process that Trinity takes when a prospective client comes to your office and you guys are getting down the road of, this is my project, this is what I'd like to accomplish. How does that education take place? Run me through a little bit of I'll say a top level overview of client comes in, they want to be educated on a component they don't have too much education on, and your role is to educate them specifically on maybe it's a hurricane related concern, for example.
So our sales process is a little unique, I believe, in how we operate. We're typically not starting right off the bat with scheduling home tours and walking clients through past homes that we've built and not really looking at photos. We really want to understand who our client is first, to understand where they're building, what kind of home they want to build, what their timeline is, what their potential budget is, and our sales process really focuses on what our actual processes and procedures are for building, so that we can let them know that we do have a process in place. There is a method to our madness. There are safeguards in place, and we've got guidelines that we follow, and really kind of show them the whole process. The organizational component of it, the transparency portion of it, and then our 3D modeling portion that we can show them how we really truly try to understand their project as well as possible. But to really answer your question, I had a potential client call me last week, and they've got a home on Venice Island right on the water, and their question was, do we tear the house, or do we renovate the home, or do we tear the house down? And for me, these homes are big investments for our clients, and really you need to take that in consideration. It's high on the list, and so we started evaluating the property. We realized he's about 6 foot NAVD, which is about kind of layman's terms, kind of 6 foot above sea level at low tide. The flood zone that they were in is an AE10, which means that if a catastrophic storm were to take a direct make landfall, in or near the home, they could expect potentially 10 foot of storm surge, and so that's basically 4 foot of water on top of their existing property. So they have 4 foot of water in the house. And the question he said was, here's the budget that I'd like to put into it. My conversation with him was, it seems kind of wasteful, but if you were to invest money into that home via a renovation, you're obviously subject to the 50% rule, right. Which has a lot of different nuances about it that, a lot of people kind of know, but aren't completely aware of it. And what's going to happen there?
Sorry to interrupt, Mike. Can you maybe touch on that just a little bit and go into detail for those that might be watching?
Yeah, absolutely. I get probably 5 to 10 phone calls a year from clients that have purchased homes in flood zones. Those homes happen to be non-conforming. They've got big renovation plans, and the client's contacting me about a renovation, and I've got to be the bearer of bad news to let them know that, hey, you really can't do what you envisioned or want to do to that home because there are restrictions. And, I think there's some education that needs to occur in and around the real estate community because I feel like some agents are doing their clients a disservice by not being up to speed on those things.
Absolutely.
But realistically, the 50% rule means that if you're in an AE10 flood zone, and the elevation of the slab of your home, the first living level, is not at 11 feet, then your home is non-conforming because you need to be a full 1 foot higher than whatever the flood zone is, which makes sense because if you're going to get a flood that comes in, you want to make sure that everything inside the home is not going to be wet, right? So if you're an AE10, your home needs to be at 11 foot. If you're anything less than 11 foot in that particular flood zone, then your home is considered non-conforming, which means that you're subject to the 50% rule. And the 50% rule states that you are only allowed to improve or renovate a home by a maximum of 50% of the stated replacement value of the structure. So you could buy a $2 million property that might have a market value of $2 million, but the home might have been built in 1963 and may have a replacement value of $500,000. Right. There are some nuances, like in the county, you're allowed to add 20% for depreciation for whatever. So say the home was worth $500,000. You could add 20% to that and then divide that amount by 2, and that's what you're allowed to invest into the property. Now, landscaping, pools, detached structures don't really play into that, but most of the times with building costs, what they are, the $200,000 or whatever it may be that you're left with to renovate that property is not really going to net most of our clients what they're
Right.
looking to do. And so sometimes private appraisals are available, which will kind of up that number a little bit. If you go that route, depreciation's not available. So say a private appraiser comes in and values the property at $700,000, well, then you've got $350,000 to work with. The issue with that is a lot of buyers are starting to become aware of this situation, and what we're seeing is most homes that are non-conforming typically only trade for dirt value on the market. So
Right.
if you have a home that you purchased, you're looking at renovating, this kind of ties into that conversation I was having with the gentleman in Venice. What I told him was, I said, you're into the property for approximately 1.5. It's got a market value right now of around 2.5 because of the time you bought it and what the market's done since then. And my recommendation to him was, whatever value you put into this home or whatever investment you put into this home from this point forward, if you're not going to elevate the home and bring the home into a conforming status, you're basically throwing money away because
Right.
whoever buys the home after you is not going
Buying
to
it
see
for
that
dirt
value.
value
It's
anyway.
only going to sell for dirt value.
Right.
And, he was extremely thankful for the amount of time that I spent with him guiding him through all these things. I said, listen, really you've got two plays here. Put a little bit of money in it, renovate it, turn it into an Airbnb, turn it into a long-term rental property, make sure you're getting some income on that. And then when the time is right, tear the house down and build a new one. I talked to a lot of clients, or I talked to a lot of people who aren't necessarily aware of the different flood zones and different things challenges that we've got to deal with here as builders and architects. And, people will say, respectfully, they'll say, but ignorantly, they'll say, I think it's very wasteful that they're tearing that house down. And the fact of the matter is,
They don't really have a
the
choice.
building codes and FEMA doesn't really allow you many options. It's
Right.
not that it's not what we want to, but, there are some exceptions to the rule, like historic properties. You can seek to get a historic designation on a property, which will take you out of the restrictions of the 50% rule. But again, good
That
luck.
comes with its own nuances as well.
Good luck getting that insured and that type of
Right.
thing. So, but yeah, the 50% rule does play a very large part in whether a home is a good candidate for renovation or not. And we always seek to educate our clients on, if you are willing to invest the money into this home, you need to be willing to walk away from that money, because
Right.
I don't think that you're going to get that money back when you
Right.
go to sell it.
Well, and I think it's you bring up a really good point when you talked about real estate agents and the disservice that they're doing to their clients by not educating them, because it's something that we've seen pretty frequently where when a buyer, closes on the transaction, they officially own the property, it's an older house right on the water, they're wanting to do those renovations, their assumption is that 50% rule is 50% of the purchase purchase price and not 50% of the replacement cost of the structure.
If that's
itself.
even their assumption at all, if that's even been explained to
Right,
them.
and that's already,
Right.
you know, we'll say one step in, not necessarily in the right direction, but it's one step closer to having education. Unfortunately, it's not the right way to approach it because that's not what the law dictates.
Right, you know, and every time, you know, I'll get phone calls from real estate agents as well as buyers who've just closed on a home, and so every time I get an opportunity to talk to an agent where they say, hey, I've got a client that's looking at this home, they want to do some renovations to it before we put an offer on it, or before we go to a hard date, you know, on our contract, I'd like to do some due diligence. Can you come out? And so that's a really good opportunity for us to kind of explain the process. And so I'm very willing and happy to really dive into those nuances with them to help them from making a financial mistake.
Right.
You know, and at least give them all of the pieces to the puzzle so they can make an educated decision, because we still have clients that say, hey, listen, I really appreciate you explaining all this to me, but the fact of the matter is, you know, it doesn't really matter to me, you know, whether I lose that money. I want what I want, and this is what I want. And so that's no problem. But I never want to get into a situation where we renovate a home, we're not upfront, we don't educate our client, they go to sell the property and you know, 5-10 years down the road, and they take a loss and they're calling me up going, hey, how come you didn't fill me in on this? You know, I never want to be in that position.
That's why
you're not making friends there.
Exactly, especially in a town like this. And I think that's where both of you have built your businesses in the most brilliant way. It's that primarily word of mouth. You have satisfied clients. You're satisfied clients to talk to other prospective clients, who then turn into clients. And I know this whole side of it may not be as relevant for you, Mark, since typically somebody is going to come to you and say, I've got the property, can't do anything with this 50% rule. I'd like to tear it down. What can you design for me?
Well, I get the same conversations Mike does. And I've even gone outside the box to provide seminars for realtors to educate them on the 50% rule.
That's awesome.
I've gone to their office and told them about it. And most of them, I say 50% of them didn't even know it existed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a liability for those realtors that don't educate their clients on the 50% rule. So they should know what it is and how to explain it to the client, especially when the client's talking about, yeah, I'm going to buy this house and I'm going to renovate it and add on to it. There's plenty of land. And nobody tells them that they do have their hands tied.
Right.
Now, like Mike said, there's things we could do. You know, if the structure is small and the property is big, we can always build a new structure that's completely compliant, and then create a physical disconnect between the new structure and the old structure, so that you could save the old structure. But not every lot has that convenience or luxury, right? Most lots we work on are, you know, if we're lucky, 100 feet wide.
Right.
You know, sometimes we get those bigger lots that have some flexibility for us. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for both being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. Anytime.